it's about the accumulation of hours. I was on the phone with a education credentialing group the other day, early childhood credentialing group the other day, and they made the comment they need to have 120 hours of this and 480 hours of this, and then they can. And I said, what's 124? What's 484? They could have been a miserable early childhood educator for 128 hours or 480. It's really not about the number of hours, right? It's about what it is you want them to be able to know and do. I'm wondering if you could go back a slide for me, Lisa. You probably can't, but hey,
I can. I'm so sorry. My
no,
computer
there you did. I don't know why it's now
yes.
back. So you just were testing my memory on my slide deck. So it isn't about the number of hours, right? It's about what it is you expect a learner to know and be able to do. And so when we think about competency-based approaches, we say, you're going to articulate for a learner up front, what is it that you know and you can do? You're going to get to advance in your study based on your demonstration of that knowing and doing. And so we might sequence and scaffold those competencies that are required in such a way so that people progress as they demonstrate their competence and they can rise in what they're able to learn. We're looking for them to prove mastery, and that mastery is typically anchored by some behavioral indicators of what performance needs to look like. You guys know this stuff because you've been doing it with all your gateways credentials. When you look at all of these descriptions about what's a level 3 credential versus a level 6 credential, right? You've articulated already what those behavioral expectations look like. So that's really what CBE is. Let's go to the next slide. So I always love to start by saying, what is a competency? Because many of you have probably heard me speak and seen this slide before, but it cannot be left out of a slide deck because I'm amazed by the number of people who think competency is just skills-based education. Depends how you define a skill, right? But you got to have knowledge first. I need to know why I'm using this skill. It's not enough that I have a skill alone. I know how to redirect a child. I need to understand the theory around why I need to redirect a child, the various ways in which I could do redirection, right? I've got to have both theory, the knowledge, and the skill and the ability to do it. And then this category we call intellectual behaviors. You in education often call it dispositions, right? I need to do it in the right way. Sit down and shut up ain't the right way to redirect a child, right? And so it's about your approach. It's about the way in which you conduct yourself. It's your interpersonal skills. For some folks, they call them their soft skills. It's that set of skills that you can learn and be able to demonstrate with that practice. So we say, what is it in this particular context do I need to know, be able to do, and how should I behave in order to be good at whatever that credential is that I'm trying to earn? Does that make sense? So that's how we view what a competency is. Okay, so now we got that under control. So what does it mean to be CBE? Let's take a look at the next slide if we could. Well, or let me back up before I say that, sorry, is when we look at using competencies as you're learning through these projects with the gateway credential, when we start to talk to each other in competencies, well, can they redirect a learner? Do they understand the psychology of a child? Do they know the dynamics of families and the home? When we start to communicate to one another in the language of competency, I now have the ability to connect learning, to compare learning, and to validate learning. Let's talk just a bit about that. Connect learning. Many of our folks are taking professional development courses, right? And so how do I take what they're learning in a professional development course? How do I take what they're doing at work and be able to connect that to what I'm teaching in the classroom when we talk about it in the terms of competencies then we have this ability to exchange that learning more freely. My dog never barks. Can you hear her barking? And I have somebody working in the house that I'm hoping is going to let her outside. And I just noticed that person is outside, which is why she's barking. So anyway, I can't do a darn thing about it. So that's connect. Second is compare. If we articulate what those competencies look like in a behavior, I could compare what it looks like when they're doing it at a privately owned daycare versus what it looks like in a classroom, right? I'm able to compare because I have a behavioral descriptor of that competency. And then if we're using competency as language and somebody comes to me and says, man, I've never gone to college or I stopped out, but I've been working in this field forever, I have a way to say, well, show me what you know and can do. And I can validate what they bring to the table. It's that kind of prior learning assessment thinking, right? I can now validate the learning that they bring. So competencies empowers all of this. But unless we're talking to each other in competencies, we have a disconnected system that allows for learning to happen in silos, that's not integrated, where we can't acknowledge what people know and can do. And so that's what we've got to connect. We look at commonalities across the CBE definitions. Most schools have their own definition of what CBE is. The first four are the things we almost always see in an institution's definitions about what you know and can do. It's about reaching mastery. We do that through rigorous assessment, and we make sure we give you a learning journey to get you to performance. There are some programs that will kind of what we call unbundle that from a course and credit hour structure, allow people to progress by competency outside of course and credit hour per se. Some schools are agnostic as a source of learning. I don't care where you learn it, just come here and demonstrate it. I'll validate it. I know how. And some schools use varying, or all schools use kind of varying degrees of personalization or flexibility. Do I use artificial intelligence to be able to move ahead in certain area? Do I use adaptive learning strategies? So you can see those in definitions as well. Next slide, please. And I think this is my last slide. So when we look at this, the question that was asked in your earlier session, can I be CBE when my whole institution isn't? Absolutely. Your credential can be. So we use the phrase competency-based education. We're thinking about it from the context of the credential. For this credential, do I articulate it in what I know and can do and the behaviors I need to demonstrate? If so, that credential can be competency-based education in its purest of forms. There are people who can't do that whole program. Maybe if you're here and you represent a bachelor's program and your gen ed is not articulated in competency, you may only be doing your major portion in a competency-based format. That's okay. We're not going to like kick you out of the movement. You're still articulating, and at some point when your gen ed folks come on board, you'll do the whole credential that way. But we typically say CBE is for that whole credential and the approach. Broaden it out, we can still use competency-based approaches and just embed it in a single course, or to take prior learning, or to offer work-based learning credit. So you've got this whole variety of ways to use competency-based approaches. We think of competency-based education being that full credential that's been articulated in the context of what are the knowledge, skills, abilities that we need. So that's the way I would kind of respond to the question of the morning. Can I be CBE if my institution isn't, right? Lisa?
Thank you so much, Charla, for the context setting and the overview. And I am going to just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about kind of the current state of the field. And I think earlier this morning, many of you heard from Dr. Stephanie Bernate, who kind of gave a lay of the land. And I think we heard our state panelists give us a lot of kind of context for what's happening right now in the state. And I do just want to provide a little bit of research, and this is really based on research that Guild Education did of their students students, but really looking at what are the challenges that we see in a pandemic, or perhaps near post-pandemic, if we can dream big, world. And what does that look like? And I know many of you on this call had to shift what was an in-person program into a digital experience, emergency remote instruction. And so this data I want to share with you is really based on student perception and faculty perception as they made that shift. But I think it's important to keep in mind as we talk about competencies in the current landscape. And so one of the things that we know is that 60% of the students who were in person before the pandemic reported a decline in some way in their quality of education. And I think in part, some of that is because what we learned is that almost 50%, 49% of our faculty who transitioned to online teaching said that they still used the same materials and the same approaches, but in an online format. And those of us who have been doing online for a while know that there's effective practices that work better online, just like there's different practices that work really well face-to-face. The next set around timing probably won't be very surprising for those of us who work directly with students, but 43% of our students said they had a change in their work schedule. We're talking a lot of frontline workers in our case. And 51% of our students said, I have to take more responsibility to take care of others in my household. And so we know that the format of learning has been challenging, the time commitment to learning has been challenging, but also want to harken back to some of the things we heard this morning. There's still challenges with equal access. And so what we know is that our Black and Hispanic students were more likely than their white peers to say that COVID is likely or very likely to impact their ability to complete the degree. And we heard a lot today about an equity imperative, and this is something that we have to keep in mind. And the reason I'm coming back to this is because all of us on this panel believe that a competency-based approach, when done well and done right, and intentionally designed to do so, it can address some of these equity issues. We also know that 47% of our students with a household income below 50K said that they had to take fewer classes or drop out. And I think that's another important thing to remember as we're thinking about COVID and the pandemic. I think the good news is that we have seen quite a bit of movement in terms of competency-based approaches. And while we have research from 2019 that I'm going to share with you, Charla, you can kick me under the table, but I do want to share just an early bit of anecdotal data that we do know based on some research that our institutions that were doing competency-based approaches during the pandemic did not have the same kind of issues or challenges, because in a competency-based program, you may be able to have some flexibility with your timing. You might be able to have assessments where students who were laid off could maybe go faster and get a little bit more done, whereas students who maybe had an increase in work responsibility or caretaking responsibility had some flexibility there. And so I believe there may be some additional data coming out on that in the new year. And when new data is available, we'll be happy to share that with you. But I do at least want to share the 2019 survey results, which were kind of alluded to earlier, but at least now you have this, and this is in your packet too. But in 2019, the American Institutes of Research with Lumina Foundation, CBEN's also a part of this work, conducts an annual kind of state of the field. Where is CBE today? And this is something that we use to kind of see where's the growth coming from? What are we seeing in the field? And of the 602 institutions that responded, we can see that 10% have full CBE programs. So again, not the majority to be full 100% CBE, but we have quite a few that are interested in or in the process of adopting. Only 15% of our institutions said, not interested. It's not our thing. But what we know is that those with full CBE programs reported a total of 448 undergraduate and 93 graduate programs, which was an increase from 2018. So we continue to see growth in this movement. When we think about how students in CBE programs compare to students in traditional programs, there still is growing and emerging research, and we still need more research in this area. But I do think that there is continued interest in what is the equity. And there's been really great research coming out of Texas A&M Commerce around the outcomes, and actually even in some cases stronger outcomes for competency-based programs where students are actually held to mastery or proficiency as opposed to a grade-based system. And I think that's important to capture here as well. To share just a little bit of additional data here, if you thought CBE is only for undergrad, 4 years colleges, or CBE is only for master's degrees, we really do see that while the majority are 4-year institutions, we still have quite a few 2-year institutions that are also engaging in a competency-based approach. And it's across the sectors, public, private, nonprofit, for-profit institutions. We see a lot of growth and interest regardless of institution type. The other piece that I want to share here, just want to highlight some of the key pieces around how students pay for programs. That also came up earlier on the calls today, was a lot about different funding models. Today, in this research, 76% of our CBE students are eligible for aid. 56% of programs cost about the same as traditional programs, so we're not looking at increased cost. And in quite a few instances, 39% of the programs were less expensive than those traditional programs. And of course, if pacing can be adjusted, how much you pay would change as well. And we'll talk a little bit more tomorrow about kind of different models and approaches and what CBE can look like in action. But what we do know is that there are barriers to doing CBE programs. It's a lot of work to get those implemented if you're doing a full program. And so you can see what institutions shared as their perceived barriers when it came to either the startup costs, or we just have so many other initiatives going on. But what I will say is, for those who have made the investment and have taken the time to do it, I think that they would say that it's been worth it, especially when the pandemic hit. And we knew that those stats I shared earlier around, people having to drop out, those institutions didn't see that same kind of challenge. The one thing I want to really highlight here is that a very common motivator here is that a competency-based approach, a competency-based program, can really be seen as an opportunity to serve those non-traditional students. We heard earlier today about the need to serve working adults, the need to serve adults who have day jobs. What does that look like? And a competency-based approach can be a really strong fit for that. And last but not least, I do want to end with the good news, which is that out of all of the institutions that responded, over 600 institutions, and in spite of the barriers, 76% said that they think CBE is going to continue to grow nationally as a movement over the next 5 years. And so I think that the positive piece here is that we will continue to see growth. There continues to be momentum, and there's a lot of effort around creating competency-based approaches. And just to reiterate what Charla shared earlier, it's not about being a completely competency-based institution. You can integrate these approaches in your own programs and even in your own courses. And so this is a good time to really highlight the way we see that in action with the Gateways to Opportunity Credential project that we've worked on. And so I do just want to highlight some key pieces to that work while I have everyone. Last year was a year of, honestly, from my perspective, just unprecedented work on the part of many people on this call. And so for those of you who are not super familiar, I just want to recap that the goal of this project was to really create individual competency modules for each of the early childhood teacher preparation competencies. There were 56 in all. And the whole goal is to increase access and to provide additional pathways for that early childhood workforce to achieve the credential and to achieve the degree. And so when I say 56 modules were designed by 11 faculty in 5 months, I think it's important to call out that every module included that competency statement. What do I know? What can I do? And how is it relevant on the job? It included a rationale for why that competency is relevant and important. It included a summative performance-based assessment to validate that competency along with a rubric. It included a set of learning resources to support that learner. And then each competency was even broken down into kind of smaller pieces with very curated open education resources and formative activities and quizzes. So opportunities for discussion and interaction, opportunities to test your knowledge. So this is not just we created an assessment and a set of competencies. This was a lot of work. In addition to this, this team went through 5 rounds of peer feedback and faculty fellow feedback. And so this was a massive lift that happened last year. And all of this work was guided by CBEN's quality framework. And so just want to highlight some pieces of this. Every step along the way, we referred back to the framework. And I also do just want to highlight for those of you who had materials mailed to you, or if you have access to Dropbox, you have access to the entire quality framework, and you also have access to a user's guide to that framework. And so please feel free to review that in your own time. But Tony Potenza and Annie Ranking, who were also part of this group with us, we kind of created a review guide based on the quality framework, really looking at not so much whether the institution was committed, because we weren't so worried about that. It was really around, are these competencies clear and measurable? Is there a coherent program and curriculum designed to these modules? What is the assessment strategy? What does that look like? And so we use that to govern our review work. What is that learner experience? Elements of that went into the review as well. But I did just want to take an opportunity to just highlight that framework and acknowledge that you all have access to that. And it's a very detailed guide of what quality looks like in a competency-based approach. One of the other things I want to call out during this pilot, during this development process that happened last year, is that our faculty who created these modules all said that they experienced some professional growth during this process. And so, about 42%, a little less than half, were at the far end and saying 5, lots of professional growth through this process of creating curriculum this way. But even on the low end, one person was like about a 2, and they may have been just, used to that development, who knows? But I think it's really key to show that this process resulted in professional development and growth. And even for our faculty fellows who did the review of this curriculum throughout the process, they even looked at it and said, this might change how I do business, how I do things at my institution. And that's just from reviewing what was done. And so I think it's really important to highlight these things, because as you're engaging in embedding competencies and creating competencies, you're really engaging in a transformative way to teach and learn that I think can be really energizing. And at least I was excited when I saw these responses. Flash forward to today, and we are getting ready to pilot these 56 competency modules across our 5 pilot institutions. Each pilot size will range from about 108 to 295 learners. And so this means that over the next year, we're going to get a lot of data about these modules, and we're going to learn how are these competencies working in action. But we will also have an opportunity where every faculty and student who's part of this pilot, or every learner who's part of this pilot, is going to give us feedback. We're going to compile that feedback, and we're going to use it to continuously improve these modules over time. What these pilots will look like at each of our 5 institutions is different. And I think this is where kind of the rubber can meet the road in terms of, am I full CBE? Am I not? What does this look like? Institutions have different ways of bundling or putting this work together. And so I just wanted to show how 3 of our 5 institutions have, at least initially, started to map which competencies go to which courses and how might this work. And so when we look at National Lewis University, and I want to thank Lisa Downey for sharing these, we can see that she's using 4 competencies from our personal and professional development, I think is PPD, 1, 2, 5, and 6. 3 and 4 go into a different course in her world, and that's okay. But those were the 4 competencies that fit into history and philosophy of education at her institution, at her program. When we look at Illinois State, and I know Sherry Sandin and Miranda Lynn, I want to thank you for putting this together. You see pre-kindergarten education, PPD 1, 2, and 6, but then they've done family and community relationships, the second competency there. That's what fits at their institution in their set of courses. And then from Heartland Community College, John Adara had shared this. She has 3, and it's all around child development. It goes in curriculum in EC settings, 1, 2, and 3. It's 3 in a row. And that's what works best at her institution. And the reason I wanted to take a moment and share this is because it is not one size fits all. It is not about you have to change every single bit of your institution. What we're really looking at is how can we start to move toward a competency approach, mastery-based, really looking at can this early childhood professional truly do these competencies on the job and in practice? And that's really what we're looking at moving toward. I do want to pause here and just take a breath and hand it over to Dr. Martha Cheney to share a bit about Walden University's journey and kind of that very specific experience. Martha?
Thanks, Lisa. And hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Martha Cheney, and my role is to just sort of guide you a little bit through a journey that we took at Walden University to get to competency-based education. I've been with Walden for 15 years, but Walden has been serving adult learners for 50 years. We had our 50th anniversary in 2020 last year, which is just amazing. Then next slide, please. And I want to give you a little bit of just a taste of our history in general, because I think it's relevant and sets some context. So our founders, Bernie and Rita Turner, were educators who had a real heart for adult learners. And they had a vision of a university where teachers and school administrators could come, who had started doctorates, but who had gotten sidetracked, maybe did all their coursework, hit that dissertation process, got hung up, and ended up over in those weeds called ABD, all but dissertation, which we've all heard about, that dreaded place. And I think in many cases this happened because the traditional programs they were in really couldn't accommodate their needs as far as, their work and family responsibilities. So Bernie and Rita thought about creating a place where those teachers and school administrators could come, bring all that prior knowledge that they'd learned from their previous studies and the knowledge and skill that they had from all their years of professional practice, and bring that together, get back on track, get that dissertation done, and achieve that doctoral degree. So it turned out that there were a lot of people over there in those weeds. There was a lot of folks who really took advantage of this opportunity. And as a result, I think the mission kind of expanded beyond just a completer program to full degree programs for working adults. And by the 80s, Walden was mature enough to seek and achieve accreditation, regional accreditation from the Higher Learning Commission, and was really rocking and rolling, but albeit in a fairly small way. In the 90s, technology booming, along comes online learning, and wow, what a perfect fit for Walden and that mission of expanding access for adult learners. Certainly, would not argue that online learning is for everybody, but for some people, for many people, especially working adults, it truly was life-changing. I mean, just imagine for a minute, you're a teacher and you live in a small town in Maine, and the nearest brick and mortar campus is 3 hours away, and you have Maine winters to contend with. Chances are you're not going to go down there and sign up for that master's program, right? Or you're a single mom in urban Atlanta, and you got colleges all around you, but you also have a job and you have kids to take care of, and you're helping care for your ailing parents. You can't get out of the house 2 evenings a week to go and attend class for several hours. For these people, online learning was truly life-changing. And students flocked to Walden, and we had tens of thousands of students. Walden really became a pioneer in online learning and was a leader. And for 20 years, an amazing 20 years, really supported a lot of students, a lot of adult learners, and expanded the degree offerings considerably. But you can't rest on your laurels, right? Or you'll be left behind. So always there was a desire to keep innovating and keep looking for ways to better serve those adult learners and expand access. I mean, I think this really speaks to the equity piece that we were just mentioning. So in 2015, Walden launched its first competency-based education program, a Master of Science in Early Childhood Studies, true to our roots in the College of Education. And by 2021, I think 19 is the right count of degree and certificate programs that are currently offered in the competency-based format across all 5 of the colleges at Walden. Next slide, please. Thank you. So why competency-based education? Why was that the logical next step for Walden? I think over the years, a lot had been learned about this student population and about these working adult learners. We knew that they wanted really relevant learning opportunities, right? That they were not looking to come and have a campus experience. They needed to be practical, applicable. They wanted programs and courses that would translate into professional advancement, into increased salaries, into new opportunities. And we knew that they also wanted to be recognized for all that they brought. Our students are 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. They've been in the field, their various fields for often very long time, have tremendous wealth of knowledge, may even have tons of academic credit, right? But sometimes it just never it was piecemeal, it was start and stop, it really never got put together in a way that could lead to a degree. So they wanted to be able to utilize that very real knowledge that they have. And we knew how busy they were and what life challenges they face. I mean, I'm often just humbled and amazed by the stories our students tell about the challenges they face and the fact that regardless, they're going to, make the commitment and do what they need to do to make a better life for themselves and to model that for their children. So more than ever, I think, life doesn't ever seem to slow down. Our students, we knew, were looking for flexibility in how they approach their studies. So CBE really just ticked all the boxes. It's highly relevant. It has that flexibility. And while it comes in a lot of forms and flavors, certainly shares some important features, I think, across all CBE programs. And the main one is the competencies. CBE programs are built around competencies, statements of what learners will know and be able to do when they leave the program. And that makes it really helps to focus then on those skills and those relevant pieces that those adult learners are really looking for. That was really appealing to us. Also, the fact that CBE does have the capacity to be highly flexible. Yes, there are, it's absolutely possible to fit CBE into traditional course-based programs. Charla and Lisa both provided some insight into that. But we decided to go with the maximum flexibility that we could imagine. And so instead of enrolling in courses, our students enroll for a subscription period of 3 months. And during that time, it's really kind of an all-you-can-eat buffet. They can complete as many competencies as they are able during that time frame. It's very self-paced, but it's not independent study. They're not out there on their own. They have faculty with the same qualifications as in our course-based programs. The faculty does the same kinds of things, right? They support students in learning the content. They assess student learning. They provide feedback. They do the mentoring. So it's really very similar, except that it's in a more personalized one-to-one format. So for us, CBE just seemed to be custom made for our learners and for our mission to keep expanding that access for our students. So next slide. So what does that mean for the curriculum? Like, how did that look? we started with an existing program. That's not necessary. You can build it from scratch, but we started with an existing program, and we got together a panel, sort of like an advisory group of stakeholders from all over the field, leaders in the field from professional organizations like the National Association for the Education of Young Children, major employers like National Head Start, thought leaders in the field, and we sat with them and we just really picked their brains about, what's happening in the field currently. What are the competencies? What are those knowledge and skill pieces that our graduates need to bring to you when they come to you as employees? What do they need to do as early childhood professionals in the field to be effective in their roles? And we took all that great information and feedback that they gave us and brought it back and sat with our faculty. And we took a look and unpacked our existing curriculum, looked at all that content. How does this align? How can we reframe this and package this so that it really lines up to those key competencies, those I can statements that our students need to leave us with? And we had to make sure that we were aligning it and keeping it, because we offer this program in 2 learning delivery systems, but it's the same program. Students have to meet the same outcomes. If you have the standards-based program, they have to meet the same standards. It's truly one program with 2 delivery systems. So we had to make sure that the content and the competencies were well aligned to the courses. And then, of course, we had to make sure that there was an organization and an approach that we could package this up and make it accessible to students and logical for students. Next slide. So what have we learned about students in the few years that we've been doing this? It feels to me like we still have so much to learn and so far to go, but it's been fascinating, and we have learned a lot from the students. Our thinking at the beginning was, wow, the students who are going to choose this format are going to be those students who want to just jump in and move really fast and get through quickly, get that degree sooner and for less money. And that's true. There were certainly a lot of students who fit that model, but we found that almost an equal number came back telling us, no, that going fast is not necessarily what I'm after in this program. What appeals to me about it is the fact that I can go at my own pace and that pace can be variable. So if I'm a first grade teacher and I run into a week where I have parent-teacher conferences and my kid has a soccer tournament and my mom's in the hospital with COVID, it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's okay in terms of my studies. I can step back completely. I don't even have to turn my computer on. I can take care of what I need to take care of. And next week, when things are maybe a little calmer, I can get in there for a few hours. I can do some reading. I can start working on a competency. And then maybe the next week, I have spring break and I can rip through 3 or 4. So that variability, because that's how people's lives really are, was very helpful. Even with our traditional online courses, there's an expectation, right? There's a cadence, there's a fixed schedule of assignments. So if I'm that same first grade teacher and I'm in the course-based version, I know that I'm going to have to get in there, do my reading, get my discussion posted on Wednesday, get my paper written for submission on Sunday, and get my week's, work done in around whatever time I have. If I can't do it and I feel like I'm falling behind or my grade's suffering as a result, and there's a real possibility that student's going to leave, right? They're going to drop out. It's just too much. I can't do it. So hearing from students how much that very, very flexible pacing was valuable for them, was eye-opening to us. And we knew flexibility was important, but we really thought it would be more in the service of shortening the timeline to degree completion and reducing costs. And it was bigger than that. So just to wrap up, I want to share with you a little bit about one of our students who had some feedback for us about her experience in our competency-based Master's in Early Childhood Studies program that I think kind of typify the experience of many of our students. So Geneva Davis was working in the early childhood field. She had quite a number of years of experience, but she wanted to advance in her field. She wanted more education about administration and management so that perhaps she could get a leadership role at her center or somewhere else. She liked the idea that if she had knowledge from her prior learning and prior experiences, she could apply it. We don't have students test out, but they can, if, for example, if there's a competency on child development milestones, and you've had child development courses before, and you've been working with the littles for a long time, you may be very confident with that material and be able to move to that assessment pretty quickly. Of course, the time flexibility that she could work it around her life, and she didn't have to give up her family time, or she could do it when it worked for her, was appealing. This one may be the most common thread of all. Just briefly, our students have an academic coach that's assigned to them at the beginning of their enrollment, and that stays with them through graduation. This is not a faculty member in our world, but it is a person who, so they don't help with the content particularly, but they can support students in all sorts of ways. They meet with them regularly. They can help with writing, with APA, with library skills, with time management, and just being somebody there to cheer them on and offer that support and encouragement and connect them to resources. Our students love their academic coaches. And then finally, this was another very common thread. So many students came back to us saying, oh my goodness, this is so different. I love this because I'm able to apply what I'm learning in my actual job site. I took my family engagement handbook to my center director, and she was thrilled and she loved it, and she wants to know if she can use some of it in her program. Or I took my PowerPoint presentation on culturally responsive teaching, and my director has asked me to do a professional development for our whole staff. These are real examples of stories that students came back with, and with many of them, they truly love the fact that, hey, this is actually real and relevant. It doesn't feel like busy work to me. So this is just a quick encapsulation of some of the fun things that we've been doing, and we're going to talk about it more in our breakout sessions tomorrow if you are interested. And certainly we'd welcome your questions now. Sorry,
Martha,
I'm rushing to try to get it all
in.
in.
No, it's great, Martha. Thank you so much for sharing Walden's story. I always think it's helpful to hear firsthand kind of what it's like and what the impact has been for learners. I do just want to highlight that tomorrow, the three of us, if you're thirsty for more, and if you're not, I hope we're sorry. But we have 2 interest sessions tomorrow, and it's the same session tomorrow twice. But we wanted to just make sure that there was an opportunity for us to really go a layer deeper here and really look at what does it mean to integrate a competency-based approach? What could that look like? And what are some of the steps that you may want to take or consider taking? And we'll have Martha again sharing kind of part of that journey along with Charla and I tomorrow. So just wanted to highlight that. Same session twice tomorrow. We'll go a layer deeper here. I do just want to open it up, and I think the 3 minutes that we have left, and just see if there's any questions. Encourage you to use the chat here. And it looks like I'm not seeing, I don't think we have any questions unless I'm missing something. Just want to double check with
I've been trying to answer them as people have gone. So instead of being in the open, they're now in the answered. And so you are welcome to rebut anything that I typed. But I tried to answer folks as they were popping questions in.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. And so I think there's good questions in there, and I think you've got to all of them, Charla. But I'm just trying to look through to see if there would be anything.
Yeah, why don't
that would be beneficial for the whole group.
Sarah asked the question about what do you do when you have learners that are leaving states? Certainly Walden operated across state lines. You know, state licensure requirements are different. How does competency inhibit that or enable that? Martha or Lisa, do either of you have a comment on that?
Well, I think, you know, I have some experience with our teacher licensure programs at Walden, which currently are not in CBE, though I would love to see that happen. But I mean, that's just the same challenges that you have with course-based, in my view. I mean, you know, you have those licensing requirements for a particular state that you have to meet, and often students will have to make adjustments, or you know, we have, for instance, we might have students who achieve a Minnesota license because that's our home state, even though our students are all over. Then they have to go to their state and meet whatever testing requirements, you know, or additional requirements might be in place. I don't really think it's an issue specifically for CBE, though. If we could get a shared vernacular on competencies in, you know, various professional fields, I think we could, certainly that's something we could, it's a way that could perhaps be mitigated in the future.
I don't know if there's anyone from WGU on the line, even as an attendee, but I've had extensive conversations with them about just the challenge of working across all of these various licensure bodies and being able to keep up. And they're doing it from a competency-based lens. What is that unique combination for this state, this state, this state?
Right.
And being able to have a technology platform that would allow you to say, this is a learner in this state, so this is their unique set of competencies, give them this unique set, right? All of that's got to be enabled by a pretty robust piece of technology, and hopefully not a manual process, to enable that.
Unfortunately, we were right at time. I know that we are, I believe, Teresa, we are headed to a break here soon, but do just want to thank all of you for your time and attention today. Tomorrow, we've intentionally left more time during that breakout session for very specific questions, and we'll be sure to get to those as well. So I will hand it back to the main team here. It looks like we have a tea break, which actually sounds lovely. So I hope you all enjoy, and thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.